Hi, Shanna Rowe Jackson here from Caution Artists That Play, and today I am doing a landscape on a round canvas. So for this first part, while I'm laying in the sky, I am actually leaving it mostly real time for you. I've cut out the spots where I am away from the canvas and mixing my colors, and I am just showing you this real time so you can kind of see what I am doing to blend out this sky and get a smooth gradient. And as you can see, I'm starting with the lighter colors first, down by the horizon line. I have my canvas taped because I want my horizon line to stay straight. That's pretty much the only thing I drew out first. I drew my horizon line on there first, then I put some artist tape on there to not only keep the horizon line and not worry about covering it with paint, but also to keep this canvas still because it could roll away. So as far as canvas goes, I am actually using a Master's Touch round canvas, which is the generic from Hobby Lobby. And I'm not normally a huge fan of Hobby Lobby's canvases because their square ones tend to have some warping issues with the stretcher bars. But these, their shaped ones don't seem to be as bad, and I actually have worked on a few of theirs in the past, some ovals and some rounds that I've really enjoyed working with. So it was a good way to save some money for me because this is actually part of a series I'm working on for school, and I needed to buy multiple canvases for this series, and so it was a great way to save money, and it's actually not a bad little canvas for a generic, so I actually recommend this canvas. I can't remember exactly how much I spent, but I don't think it was over $10. I think this is a 10-inch canvas, so I think it was much less than $10 actually. I just don't remember the exact amount. So now, as you see, I'm going in with my darker colors, and to get this smooth gradient, I'm kind of working Bob Ross style, where he does some crisscrossing, and then he swipes across. I kind of tell myself, crisscross, applesauce, swipe. It's kind of a little saying I say in my own mind while I'm doing it. I know it's kind of corny, but that's just kind of how I remember it. I'm crisscrossing, and then I'm going through where I want it to be blended out, and I am swiping, and I'm doing this all while it's still wet. So if you work quickly enough with acrylic, you can get a smooth gradient. You don't have to, I don't know, you just have to work quickly. I didn't even actually wet this canvas first, which sometimes helps, but this time I didn't wet it. I just went right in, and I'm using mostly Liquitex Basics and the Daler-Rowney System 3 acrylics, and those are a medium body acrylic, which helps. Heavier body makes it a little bit harder because they tend to dry faster, so I always recommend thinner acrylics for doing something like this, like a sky. And I like these paints anyways. They tend to be my go-to, the medium bodied acrylics, because of, like I said, they don't dry so fast, but I like to do a lot of layering. So I actually like working things up in thin layers. So I'm not a huge fan of heavy-bodied acrylics to begin with, and these are cheaper, and they still are light fast, and they just work well with my style. So I'm laying in what I call this ghosting in my own mind, you know, me and my technical terminology. But I am laying in the groundwork for my clouds. I'm kind of ghosting in the clouds. So they're not going to have a whole lot of detail just yet. I'm just trying to get my shapes in because, as I said, I didn't draw this out first. Normally in detailed things such as I don't know, portraiture and things like that, I draw my things out ahead of time. But oftentimes when I'm working with landscapes, I don't draw it out ahead of time. Like I said, I might put my horizon line in, but generally speaking, I don't necessarily draw out every single detail because it doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to know if that cloud looks exactly as it did in the reference photo. And it really doesn't matter because there's nothing perfect about nature. I mean, nature, I guess, is perfect in its imperfection. There's my philosophical note for today, but it really, you know, nobody's going to know the difference if a tree is a little bit off or if leaves aren't in the perfect place. So I don't generally draw out my landscapes unless it's something really intense or it's something close up outdoors that's really highly detailed. But for something like this where there's going to be a lot of distance involved, I'm just going to go right in with paint. Sometimes, if I do decide to draw out things like sometimes like mountains or something like that, I might use a watercolor pencil or something water soluble, so that way there it doesn't you know, interfere with the paint layers, and it can just be washed away with the paint. So if you do want to draw on your canvas, I recommend something that's not going to be necessarily graphite. I used to do that when I was younger, and I used to find myself fighting with it. So you want to just make sure that you're using something that can be easily washed away, either some type of pastel pencil that can be wiped away easily, or something water soluble, something that goes well with the medium that you're working with. So now I'm just going in and I am putting some of the shadows in these clouds, and I am using a reference photo. This is from the top of Cadillac Mountain, and it's a reference photo I took, I don't know, a year or two now ago when me and my husband went there on a day trip for our anniversary. And with clouds, you want to remember that they are three-dimensional. I mean, they are technically vapor, but they do have light and shadow. They do react to the light that is around them. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to the direction of light and where the shadows are going, and also the colors of the shadows. Sometimes, depending on how close the clouds are to their surroundings or to the ground below them, if you think about, you know, if you're on a mountain, sometimes the clouds are like right up against the mountains. You can actually see some of the color of the ground in some of the shadows of the clouds sometimes. So you just want to pay close attention to those subtle nuances when you're looking at your reference photo. Now, I'm not saying you just go right in there heavy with green. You just want to pay attention to the tones that are in those shadows, and you'll get a more realistic result. This one has a few, it's going to have some mountains below it and stuff, so there are some tones in there with browns and things like that. I always mix my shadows with colors that are already in the painting. This one is going to be, the shadows are mostly the sky color mixed with, I think it's burnt umber, and to get the shadows of those clouds. And later on, I will warm it up with just some subtle grayish greens in that top cloud. And it's not really obvious in the painting itself, but it just brings things together a little bit. So now I am laying in those distant mountains. It actually kind of looks like I'm doing an ocean, but I'm not. And this could have been an ocean piece, but it's going to be mountains. So when you are working with a landscape painting, you always want to pay attention to light, and you want to pay attention to atmospheric perspective, which is really, it's essentially the fact that anything further away is going to be lighter in tone, and it's going to start to take on the color of the sky a little bit. So those mountains in the distance, in real life, in reality, are probably green and brown, and, you know, they're made of stone, and so they're not technically blue. However, because they're so far away, the vapor and just the particles in the sky are covering that, because there's so much air between us and the horizon and us and those mountains. So that air is going to show up in your painting. So you don't want your background mountains to be the same color as your foreground mountains. And that goes for anything. Even if you're doing a field, a landscape that's just all vast fields that go far away, the further away it is, the lighter it's going to be, and the more blue tones it'll take on. Or if you're doing a yellow sky, then the more yellow it'll take on, because it does take on some of the color of the sky. So that's just something to remember, and it's an easy tip to show distance in your paintings. Generally speaking, the closer to the horizon, the lighter it is, and that goes for the sky as well. So if you think of the horizon line as, you know, the middle point, and it's your eye level, it's where your eye hits. So where your eye hits is going to be the lightest, and then it'll go darker. So the sky is going to be lighter at the bottom of the sky and get darker as it goes to the top, and the land is going to be lighter at the top and darker as it comes towards the bottom. And I found those mountains in the foreground to be a little bit too dark, so I went and put a glaze over it to lighten it back up, and then I'm just going to go back in with my details, because I wanted to push those off a little bit further, because even though they are the closer mountains, they're still further away from where we are, because we're standing on a mountaintop, and those are mountains that are near us, but not obviously the same mountain that we're on. And then I'm also laying in some rivers and some lakes and things that are off in the distance, and those pretty much take on the same color as the sky as well. Usually the lightest part of the sky for the furthest away ones, and then the one that's a little bit closer to us takes on the darker color of the sky. And so I want to talk a little bit more about using a round canvas. I chose this round canvas because I thought that I think of like the round canvas as almost like a portal. It's almost like you're looking through a telescope or binoculars or something to that effect. And I wanted it to kind of feel that way. So whenever you are thinking about a shape, if you want to use a shape for your artwork, you want to think about how it relates to what you're painting on it and what it brings to it, because you want it to bring something to it. Otherwise, you might as well just put it on a rectangle. So you want it either theoretically to bring something to your artwork or definitely compositionally, you know, so you want a little bit of both in there. So just think about things before you choose it. I mean, it's fun to work on shapes and things like that, but you also want to think about what it's bringing to the artwork that you're actually doing. And this is part of my Sky series, and my Sky series is basically a series that obviously is centering around skies, but it's also centering around like the feeling you get when you look at the sky. So this one, I really wanted to get the vastness of the sky in there, and I wanted that cloud above us so you could tell that, you know, there's some depth in there, and then just the feeling of being amongst the clouds and being up high. For this specific piece, that's what I was going for. And I thought that like the roundness, the way it's centered in on that, and just the way the cloud sits at the top really brought that together for me. So that's just something to consider whenever you are thinking about composition in general. You want to just really see what it brings to your artwork and, you know, really think about why you're doing these shapes, because there are a lot of fun shapes out there. And now I'm putting in the foreground, and this is a lot warmer. These colors are going to be a lot warmer than the colors around it, because obviously this is the rock we're standing on. These are going to be the bushes that are closest to us, and so they're going to be warmer in color. And they're going to have higher contrast too. So my shadows are going to be a little bit darker, and my highlights are going to be a little bit lighter. Some of the trees that are further down the rock peak, they're mostly just dark, but they still stand out quite well against that background because I lightened it up to make sure that it wouldn't be so dark and to give it that atmosphere that I was looking for. And again, when I put that little whitewash over it earlier, when I kind of glazed over it again to lighten it up, it wasn't just white. There was a little bit of blue in there. Of course, titanium white kind of will blue things out a little bit anyways, but I did put a little bit of that sky color in there when I did that so that it would contrast really well against the foreground. All right, so this is the final piece. I hope that you enjoyed this and that you learned something about landscape. This is actually the 12th from my Sky series, and I still have a few more planned, but I do plan on showing them to you after I am finished with the series. All right, so thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please hit subscribe. Also, if you're interested in seeing more of my artwork, I'm on social media, so check out the links in the description below.